and Thomson Reuters present the future of global capability centers.
Welcome back. You're watching CNBC-TV18 and Thomson Reuters present the future of global capability centers. And we have a very expert panel discussing this particular important topic. Now, we left off where Naveen was stating the importance and the value addition that the global capability centers and such as India is now providing and how the transformation has really taken place. Now we are in this particular phase. Sumit, I want to draw your attention to the key attributes that you will ascribe to the GCCs in really going higher in the value chain.
It's a great question. So I'll have 5 points on that. Number one, I think what's most important for a GCC is to have a seat on the table of the exec committee. Because if you don't have that, you can't influence decision making. So whether it's the core strategy of the organization, whether it's the implementation plan on technology at a global scale. So how do you influence that from a GCC perspective to create more value for the group? That's number one. Number two, I talked about earlier on, it's about value creation rather than cost focus, because cost in your GCC is finite. Point number three, it's also really important to connect the GCC to the purpose, the core purpose of the mothership, the real organization, the purpose of the organization. Because otherwise we'll end up building something 10,000 miles away that doesn't connect to the core strategy and the purpose of the organization. The fourth point is data. Data is the new oil. So how do we leverage, how do we trap, how do we make sure we secure and analyze the data to leverage the data to make the right decisions and inputs into the right decision-making of the corporation. It's really key. And finally, how do we focus on the skills of the future? Because the skills that we need now, right here, right now, is going to go away in the next 5 years. Because as we bring in more digitalization, as we bring in more continuous improvement, AI, ML, this would take away all the activities that we are currently doing now.
That's right, Sumit. And the biggest takeaway is that the GCCs always have to be ahead of the curve. They have to be much more futuristic, and therefore they can add value and be more relevant for the organization. And that's how the importance will really grow. Lalit, do you think the specific innovation as well as technology specific to some key functions that GCC really conduct have really helped in building their importance?
Yeah, so I want to start off by saying this whole notion of diminishing distance between the GCC and the business. The lines are getting blurred. It's sometimes hard to tell where the mothership or the parent company or the business ends and where GCCs begin, right? And that is obviously providing a tremendous opportunity for the GCCs to influence the future-proofing and the relevancy agenda of the businesses. There are two major sort of drivers in the business where GCCs are currently playing to. The first one is the fact that every business is now becoming a technology business in disguise of whatever their core is, right? You could be a retailer or an airline or a bank. Ultimately, you're a technology-first business and everything else comes second. And the next notion is one of the Amazonization of businesses, right? Which in some ways is linked to a much greater technology adoption. And what's happening is that much of adoption or accelerated adoption of technology and innovation obviously brings a profound change for organizations, right? And sometimes the change is so profound that most companies are not able to manage this level of transformation and disruption. GCCs are also providing companies with the ability to get talent from all kinds of pools, from something that traditional companies normally don't do in the home locations. For example, you can bring in talent from tech and product companies to drive the productization of the business or services of a particular company. You can bring in talent from startups to bring in that sense of urgency and the entrepreneurial spirit that will accelerate the transformation of the companies. So in terms of specific innovation and technology trends, we see a lot happening in India, but I guess much of it is driven in ensuring the acceleration of digital determination of businesses, right? So
Yes.
Anything digital, from cloud to AI cognitive to automation, are becoming some of the mainstream concepts or themes for GCCs in India. We see a very active startup grown-up corridor, emerging in locations like India, where you find a startup solution to an enterprise or a grown-up problem, and that is obviously spurring in a lot of innovation. I mean, we're looking at almost about 1,000 startups on an annual basis actively engaging with enterprises through their GCCs.
Yes.
And fast-tracking innovation into these organizations.
So fast-tracking the digital innovation as well as the digital journey, that is coming out as one of the key points that you mentioned, Lalit. But Naveen, help me understand, are there challenges for India-based GCCs to evolve to next level from where they have reached right now? How do you see that growth path?
No, you're right. So I think we have evolved over a period of time, but at the same time, we still have to get our place in the world, so to say. So of course, the first phase was where the model was simple. You take offshore, you standardize, you automate, and now the focus is becoming transformation. And moment you say transformation, and so it means it gets more complex. So I'll give you a simple example, then you will understand how complex it can be. So moment you say, I want to automate or transform my procure to pay process. So it means you're not only talking about what's in your control. So there are suppliers allowed, there are various departments allowed, you have logistic pair who is supplying you material, you have banking channels for payments, then you have statutory authorities where you have to give your reports, etc. So it means how do you create that transformation solution which is weaving all these things into one place and giving you a flawless and smooth experience. At the same time, there's one more important point that GCCs, when they're becoming complex, they will have to understand they cannot do everything on their own.
Yes.
So it means they have to leverage the ecosystem. So startup is one part which was mentioned earlier, but in addition to that, there are many established players. You have to forge partnership with them and create with a global solution and create that kind of feeling that we are a global organization.
Yes.
And also give that impression to your counterparts that we are not sitting in one corner and delivering something. So we are part of the whole value chain, which is a global value chain.
That's right. They can't operate as silos and they have to be much more collaborative, and talent is one very important point that you also mentioned, Naveen. But Pradeep, final comments from you. How do you see the next chapter of growth for GCC in India? And investment is also very critical. Are many companies looking at really investing in the future capabilities?
I think the short answer is yes. I think Sumit, Naveen, and Lalit covered it quite well. The GCCs are very much keen and eager and are already investing in grooming and getting the talent ready for the next phase in our journey and our evolution. But I think the key for us right now is how do we we are doing, and we have great examples of all of that in pockets, but how do we bring it all together, do it in a more cohesive way, and also do it in a sustained way? And I think, it's not enough for us to say we have a great GCC, but we have to also say we have a great GCC that's delivering impact for our company on a day-to-day basis, right? And there's several ways of getting at it. I really like the way Lalit put it, right? So the line is getting blurry on where the GCC ends and where the headquarters starts, and where GCC is moving from doing support enabling work to actually doing decision making, and actually making decisions for the entire company. It's almost behaving like a headquarters to an extent, right? So I think we have great examples and we're making great strides. But I think what we need to aspire to is to kind of delivering that kind of impact, in a sustained way and in a bigger way. And we have to also realize we're asking for accountability, we're asking for responsibility, but at some point in time, we're going to have to stop asking because it's already here, and we're going to have to deliver the impact of having that kind of accountability. And that comes with continuing focus on ourselves, continuing focus on talent, continuing focus on leadership development. And so it's not just enough to be process experts. We need to be business experts. We need to be commercial experts. So there's that level of investment that we need to make within ourselves. But I'm delighted to see GCCs across the board are making that kind of investment.
That's right. The transformation has really taken place, Pradeep. But what you're now highlighting is the next phase where the decision making also comes to these global capability centers, especially India being at a strategic vantage point for many of the global companies that we have seen. So the journey has a huge amount of potential. And of course, there is talent, investment, as well as collaboration to be looked at very keenly as well. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Pradeep, Sumit, Lalit, Naveen, for joining us and giving all your insights. It was a very interesting discussion. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to all our viewers for tuning in.
CNBC-TV18 and Thomson Reuters present the future of global capability centers.